Just like God Almighty allowed to his service mainly men who became his priests under the holy service, the women who felt excluded of this divine privilege seeked shelter and power in his dark rival. A matriarchy of malevolent women who served as priestess to make others abide the rules of whom once was the light bearer, the current king of all the infernal circles. These evil presences, who you could say have lost their humanity by selling their souls to the devil, are holders of a demonic power that brings pain and misfortune to those who fall victim of their rage. Witches. This is a topic that has brought terror to humankind for centuries, for the belief of them roaming around has existed since ancient times. Beings capable of manipulating reality and the forces of nature through black magic in order to wreak havoc and destroy lives in horrifying and unimaginable ways. Witchcraft has been part of many cultures around the world, an undeniable fact that keeps us wondering whether it's all a huge coincidence or if there's a backstory that explains the fear these terrifying creatures instill on us. In the late 15th century, numerous literate Europeans believed witches existed and that they usually practiced diabolical activities like black magic and jinxing. In those times, many people firmly believed that most, if not all, witches made an explicit personal pact with the devil, and that said pact with Satan himself granted witches the power to develop and cast incantations, curses, and jinxes, allowing them to serve the wicked one. It was also thought, and there are those who still think, that witches have the ability to transform into many of their favorite animals: frogs, toads, hares, and black cats. It is also believed they can shape themselves as fireballs. They're able, protected by the darkness of night, to roam around rooftops of houses to torment the families that live in them, especially in rural and sparsely populated areas. The popular belief is that witches gather around at night in special places and form a coven to perform their black magic rituals. The places they choose to practice this art are not randomly picked out of whim by one of the coven members. These places are, indeed, located far from civilization, right in the middle of a lonely field or deep in a forest, where their incantations can be well performed and effective. It was claimed, especially during the Renaissance era, that initiations to witchcraft started at a young age. Old witches would drag boys and girls younger than 5 from their beds while their parents slept, and would fly them to their covens. If they told someone about what they saw every night, they would be lashed by their instructors. One of the responsibilities these kidnapped children had was to keep the witches' frogs safe, for they needed them to make their potions and ointments that, among other purposes, made them fly. At the beginning, it wasn't expected from the kids to abjure their faith because they were too young, so they were only presented to the devil. Once they turned 6, their instructors convinced them to renounce on Christ through candies and promises of fantastic objects. Incidentally, not all the kidnapped kids ending up being witchcraft apprentices. The less fortunate became cannibal food, especially toddlers of 2 years or less, whose corpses were used by the witches to prepare their magic ointments and dusts. Additionally, the possibilities of the kids in relation to witch hunt were important and even crucial. Also, the events that occurred at the stakes, often accompanied by strange and large-scale phenomena, in a way or another involved young children. Witch hunt is vastly known to have happened in Europe in the Middle Ages and in America during colonization. In these events, thousands of women were chased and executed by the church under witchcraft accusations. In the same way, witch children were identified all over Europe, and the sentence of witchcraft to a mother made suspicion befall on all her offspring. During the trials, confessions were drawn out from children more easily than from adults, since it was simpler to pressure and confuse them. It is necessary to emphasize that many of these women and children who were burnt at the stakes and executed in equally vicious ways were innocent of such accusations. In some cases, they were just families that practiced an early form of medicine for which they used plants and natural ingredients to make healing ointments. However, the fear for these practices ran deep in the veins of society and were punished by the clerical organizations of the time, for they were equally severely treated and offered false promises of salvation so they would confess their supposed link to the devil. Once the confession was obtained and swayed by despair, the victims were led to their execution. In a much less extent, there were men who also died due to these persecutions, but this was more of an exception than a rule, since most of the victims of these witch hunts were women and children, especially girls. Now, just imagine living in those dark times and being accused of witchcraft. Your only fate, at best, was to get a quick death. Due to this, it is believed that witches completely repudiate the Christian faith and rebaptized by Satan himself as a symbol of submission, and their attention is focused on their capacity to harm and hurt, even more due to their association or union to the wicked one. The fact is that these characters continue to give much to talk about nowadays, and there are even some who believe, in a much lower degree than the old time, that witches still fly over us in the night skies. What's more unsettling is that, with the emergence of cameras, there have been many pictures and video footages that capture both intentionally and accidentally the existence of these beings all over the world. Whether they're real or not, it's completely up to you.